I'm Bill Lilley. I'm the Chief Research Officer for Race for 2030, and as was said earlier, we're very proud to co-sponsor this program. I've been asked today to answer a question, which I'd love to put on the screen. Okay. And that question is that we have much of the technology available to decarbonise industry today, but to quickly scale this rollout, we need to embrace digital technology. So I'm just going to give a quick thought starter to this particular process. The agenda is really looking at digital technologies in the industrial decarbonisation process, variation in that across different parts of industry. Really then a little bit of a refocus of where industry revolution is going, considering some global benchmarks and what that might mean. And then finally just touching on Australia's digital industry and opening up to opportunities and challenge questions, which will then lead into a panel session which I've got the pleasure of hosting with a number of different colleagues here that I'll introduce later. So digitalisation is a significant hurdle for reducing emissions within industry. We've heard this morning about having to measure and understand our energy use, the way that we can do things more productively. There are a raft of different digitalisation technologies. This starts with smart sensors. It looks at data analytics, learning and optimisation, cloud and edge versions of computing, augmented, virtual and mixed versions of reality in order to help decision making, automation and robotics, which we've obviously seen a lot of in the last 20, 30 years, and additive manufacturing. So I think Amy pointed before 3D printing and being able to use resources more efficiently. A lot of this is really there to enable and to break down the barriers, to do that barrier busting that Amy talked about. So we know, I think he said 50 to 80 different market barriers that exist. There are a huge number of these, but digital information can help us with one of the major ones, which is information asymmetry across the value chain, really helping to understand and break down risk, get people to make better informed decisions that look at the whole of energy system. In doing so, reducing transaction costs across the value chain, and really then building into this idea of circular design and on consumption. I just wanted to touch on the different variants that we get across industry, because it's a very heterogeneous sample that we look at. And there are different measures that are used all over the world for this. And I've just chosen one here, which is from the World Economic Forum, and on their Smart Industry Readiness Index, the SIRI. This comes from 600 manufacturers across 30 different countries, looking at and understanding 16 different factors. So like everyone else in here, I probably love a good taxonomy. But this is really to understand and look for those identification of options and the types of actions that we might have to do with digitalisation. It's not just a ubiquitous one-for-all sort of measure. And these charts are really just highlighting the variance that you get across different types of industry types. And that's looking at both the maturity and the rates of change within those systems. But I'm going to take those data and look at an analysis of that next in both industry itself overall in those 600 samples, and then breaking it down into large industrials, multinational corporations, if you will, and small to medium enterprises, because we hear a lot of this sort of talk about, well, what can we do for SMEs? And I think these following charts are quite illustrative. On the left, you see a variance between bottom performance on the far left, sort of your mid-average performance in the middle, and your top performance in the green line in that chart. And really, this is just to show across those 16 different metrics that there's quite a variance between those performances, if you will, over those different industry user types. What is more interesting to me is actually the translation of the impacts from large companies into smaller ones, which you can see on the right chart. And this is really looking at multinationals, which are having a slightly higher maturity index, and SMEs, which pretty well mirror that. The one thing that actually is, and I think is illustrative and things that we can think about today, are the ones for shop floor and automation. These ones are actually quite similar in both small and large enterprises. And that really reflects this sort of move from putting sensors into businesses, looking at automation and control, and then really moving towards that sort of collaborative robotics movement across the range of business sizes and business types. And this has really come down to a couple of different factors, one of which is actually just visibility of your options. So it's actually the equivalent, I think, of what Amory is pointing to, of putting a hard hat on something. You're making this visible, people are seeing the business choice. And the second actually is major support from government, really allowing these sort of capital injections to do this shop floor automation. But that's only one of 16 factors that need to be considered here. So when we look at digitalisation, we need to understand the raft of things that need to happen across the value chain. Now, I wanted to just focus, because we'll hear and we talk a lot today about Industry 4.0. And within RACE, we have a lot of Industry 4.0 supported work. But there is a move, and it's actually very much a post-COVID move, towards human-centric versions of these sorts of transformations, if you will. There's this move from 4 to 5, and that's really putting a human-centered, human-machine interaction focus to the change we're looking at. It's not really just about making systems more efficient and removing humans from the system. It's actually about embedding humans back into the system and back into the process. Part of that is obviously then looking at recyclable materials, doing these whole-of-system impacts with embedded sensors, developing up real-time digital twins so we can look and understand and look at change. Cyber-safe, interoperable technology. As we input more data, we obviously have many more issues to deal with cybersecurity. And really looking at actionable versions of artificial intelligence and machine learning, rather than the sort of old-school standard optimization and standard machine learning aspects, which are really just about getting better control over individual bits of device. I brought up another World Energy Forum chart here, and this is really just using, and there are many examples across the world, and one of the, I guess, equally frustrating but equally enlightening things to look at are these sort of global benchmarks, lighthouses, case studies that exist. There's a lot that we can build off, nationally and internationally, and we need to be able to do more to assist that to happen. This one example here is very much an Industry 4.0. It's really looking at technology-enabled smart factories. And what, to me, really jumped out, and the reason I wanted to put out this, in the last 3 years I was in Paris doing a lot with the IEA, hearing a lot about the Global South. As an Australian, often getting a little bit offended by the terminology. But it is interesting here to note that there is actually nothing in the South as, lighthouse examples here. So what do we have to do, to get on that map? What is unique to Australia, and are we really utilising world's best practice? These are the sorts of open questions that I would like some of the panellists to start answering when we look today. I wanted then to touch on, and I'll build on actually Anna's point from earlier on some of the ecosystem development. One of the interesting things, and this is work from CSIRO on the right, that's really mapping out and understanding digital clusters. And these ones are mapped very much to the Australian urban environment. So you've got Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Canberra. And really looking at these, digital precincts, if you will, where potentially there are, scale advantages to be had. In the same way that Anna talked to having scale advantages to industrial precincts, Australia is actually well set up to do similar things in the digital landscape, and we can build on that. And that's despite, I would say, the fact that we actually do a poor job realistically relative to our OECD counterparts of spending money in this section as part of the gross value add. We're actually, in this chart over to the left, right on the bottom, or near the bottom, in terms of our expenditure on these services, and also on what we spend in R&D. We actually embed this quite strongly within our business operations, but that really clearly shows that we're actually building and taking away from a lot of the world, and we're not actually building up our own internal capability around those. So I'm very heartened that we've got this opportunity and looking to exploit these opportunities, but we need to build upon those. So that really, I was just going to finish there and use that as a chance to talk to the opportunities. Challenge is really just a thought starter. There are a lot of challenges that in the sustainability area around lack of expertise, and this is really to do with the adoption of it, lack of expertise, time constraints, sort of regulatory complexity, which we want to help break down, supply chain sustainability, and access to capital. Obviously, we talked before about that linkage between multinationals and SMEs, where capital has been made available and where good policy has been made available. Digitalisation is clearly a key enabler to help us do this. It will decrease these information asymmetry barriers that I talked about before. The most important thing is it really reduces uncertainty and improves quality control, so it helps decision making. But we have to do the best with data. Data as well, we need to make sure that we use data effectively and actually right-size data. That will help minimise transaction costs and optimise the system. So where to from here? From my perspective, coming from the research community and helping to bring research to industry, really looking at interdisciplinary design, building on those complex system solutions that Amory so well pointed out well before. Really having, as Anna talked to, outcome-orientated ecosystem development with agile policy and innovation landscape. And building on that Industry 4 to Industry 5.0 movement, really having socially acceptable human-centred productivity. So it's not just about equipment doing things cheaper and better, it's about actually having this people embedded within this process.